Most people believe that not eating for a full day is nothing more than a test of discipline. They assume hunger is the enemy, weakness is inevitable, and the body slowly deteriorates without constant fuel. That belief, however, is fundamentally wrong. The moment food stops coming in, the body does not collapse into crisis. It transitions into a different operating mode, one that humans evolved to rely on long before modern abundance, refrigeration, and endless snacking became the norm. What feels like hunger on the surface is not damage or danger, it is a signal, and signals are instructions, not threats. In the first few hours after your last meal, the body behaves almost as if nothing has changed. The stomach continues to release digestive enzymes, following a rhythm built through repetition and habit. This is not inefficiency or error, it is conditioning. For most of human history, eating followed predictable patterns rather than constant availability. Your body assumes food will return until enough time passes to prove otherwise. During this phase, hormones begin quietly shifting in the background. Insulin, the hormone responsible for escorting glucose into cells, starts to decline gently, not dangerously, simply enough to alter priorities. At the same time, hunger hormones rise, not because the body is starving, but because the brain is testing whether the old system still works. Early hunger is not desperation, it is negotiation. By around the 4th hour, many people misinterpret what they are experiencing. The stomach tightens, concentration wavers, and an urge appears to eat quickly before something goes wrong. Metabolically, however, nothing is wrong. Blood sugar remains stable, energy reserves are intact, and vital organs are protected. The discomfort felt at this stage is not physical failure, but psychological resistance to change. This is the first real barrier of fasting, and it has nothing to do with weakness. It has everything to do with uncertainty and the brain's attachment to routine. Between 6 and 8 hours, the body stops waiting for food and begins preparing for its absence. Blood glucose levels gradually decline in a controlled, deliberate manner. In response, the pancreas further reduces insulin output, signaling that constant carbohydrate intake is no longer guaranteed. This is when the liver steps into a central role. Stored glycogen, a form of glucose preserved specifically for moments like this, is released into the bloodstream to maintain balance and protect brain function. Glycogen acts as the body's metabolic backup power supply, not designed for comfort, but for survival. This stage often feels paradoxical, producing fatigue alongside alertness, calm mixed with irritability, and focus paired with restlessness. This contradiction is not dysfunction. It is transition. If this explanation is already helping you understand your body more clearly than you ever have before, take a moment to subscribe. Supporting the channel allows us to continue delivering science-based content without fear, exaggeration, or misinformation. Now, let's continue. By the 10th hour, a deeper shift begins. As glycogen stores diminish, the liver initiates a powerful metabolic process that many people underestimate: the conversion of fat into ketone bodies. These molecules are not a last resort fuel, they are a highly efficient alternative energy source, particularly favored by the brain during extended periods without food. Ketones do more than replace glucose. They alter the brain's operating state. Many people report sharper focus, reduced mental noise, and a calm clarity that feels unfamiliar in a constantly fed body. This experience is not psychological suggestion. Ketones provide steadier energy with fewer fluctuations and less metabolic waste than glucose. At the cellular level, efficiency becomes the new priority. Inside each cell, mitochondria, the structures responsible for energy production, adapt to scarcity by eliminating inefficiency. Energy generation becomes cleaner, producing less oxidative stress and fewer damaging byproducts. Over time, this reduction in cellular stress is one reason fasting is studied in relation to aging and long-term health. Alongside this shift, another process quietly begins to activate, one that plays a central role in cellular repair and resilience: autophagy. Autophagy is the body's internal recycling system. It allows cells to identify damaged proteins, dysfunctional components, and unnecessary structures, then dismantle and reuse them. Under conditions of constant eating, autophagy remains suppressed because cells are perpetually occupied processing incoming nutrients. Fasting removes this distraction. As insulin levels continue to fall, typically around the 12-hour mark, fat metabolism increases and autophagy begins to intensify. This moment marks a decisive change. The body is no longer focused on intake or storage, it shifts toward maintenance and repair. This is also the stage where cravings often peak, not because the body is failing, but because it is crossing a metabolic threshold. The brain, deeply conditioned by habit and routine, attempts one final push to restore the familiar pattern of eating. This is where most people stop fasting, not due to physical danger, but due to discomfort and uncertainty. However, if this point is passed, something stabilizes. Hunger softens, energy levels even out, and the body accepts fat oxidation as its new primary fuel source. This is the moment fasting becomes metabolically real, not as deprivation, but as control. What follows is not collapse or weakness, but adaptation, and this is only the beginning of the transformation. As fasting moves beyond the halfway mark, the body enters a phase that feels unfamiliar to most people raised in a constantly fed world. Around the 17th hour, the brain begins operating under a new metabolic rhythm. Ketones now supply a significant portion of its energy, and this shift does more than keep neurons alive. It changes how they communicate. Neurotransmitters recalibrate. Electrical signaling becomes more stable. For some, this produces a sense of heightened focus and mental sharpness that feels almost unnatural, like clarity without stimulation. For others, especially those not metabolically adapted, it can feel like irritability or restlessness. Both experiences reflect the same underlying reality. The brain is learning to function without relying on constant glucose spikes. From an evolutionary perspective, this response makes sense. Hunger did not signal collapse for early humans, it signaled necessity. When food was scarce, the brain needed to become more alert, not less. Fasting reactivates that ancient survival program. Attention narrows, distractions fade, the nervous system shifts toward efficiency. What feels uncomfortable in a modern context once meant survival. The brain is not struggling here, it is optimizing. As ketone availability increases, another important transition occurs. The brain's dependence on external energy cues weakens. Instead of reacting to every rise and fall in blood sugar, neural activity stabilizes. This is why many people report reduced mental noise during fasting. Thoughts feel quieter, more linear, less reactive. The mind is no longer being pushed and pulled by frequent metabolic fluctuations. It settles into a steadier baseline. While the brain adapts, the heart is undergoing its own recalibration. By the 20th hour, insulin levels are low and circulating glucose is reduced, which has direct effects on cardiovascular function. Lower insulin reduces inflammation in blood vessels, improving their ability to expand and contract. Blood pressure often trends downward, and heart rate variability can increase. This variability is not weakness, it is resilience. A heart that can adjust its rhythm fluidly is better equipped to handle physical and emotional stress. However, this adaptation also reveals why fasting demands awareness rather than recklessness. As glycogen and insulin decline, electrolyte balance can shift. Sodium, potassium, and magnesium levels may drop if hydration is neglected. For most healthy individuals, this is easily managed with proper fluid intake, but it underscores an important point. Fasting is not about deprivation. It is about intelligent regulation. When done consciously, the heart adapts smoothly, finding a new equilibrium that favors efficiency over excess. At this stage, the body is no longer improvising. It is executing a well-rehearsed biological sequence. Fat stores are now the primary energy source, supplying muscles, organs, and the brain through a combination of fatty acids and ketones. The liver plays a continuous balancing role, converting glycerol into glucose to support cells that cannot run on fat, such as red blood cells. Every system participates. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is accidental. Around the 22nd hour, one of fasting's most significant processes reaches a meaningful intensity. Autophagy, the cellular cleanup mechanism, accelerates. cells begin systematically dismantling damaged proteins, dysfunctional components, and accumulated waste. These materials are not discarded. They are recycled into usable building blocks. Under constant feeding conditions, this process remains muted. Fasting removes the noise and gives cells permission to repair themselves. Autophagy is not a cosmetic benefit. It is a foundational maintenance process linked to immune function, disease resistance, and cellular longevity. By clearing internal debris, cells reduce the risk of malfunction and inflammation. This internal housekeeping is one reason fasting has been studied in relation to aging and chronic disease prevention. It is not about extending life through deprivation, but about preserving function through renewal. As autophagy intensifies, the hormonal environment shifts again. Human growth hormone begins to rise sharply, often increasing several-fold compared to baseline levels. Growth hormone is commonly associated with muscle development, but its role is far broader. It supports tissue repair, protects lean mass, mobilizes fat for energy, and enhances cellular recovery. During fasting, this hormone acts as a safeguard, ensuring that the body prioritizes preservation while fuel is limited. This hormonal surge directly challenges one of the most common fears surrounding fasting: muscle loss. In a short-term fast, the body does not indiscriminately break down muscle for fuel. Instead, elevated growth hormone helps protect muscle tissue, while fat and glycogen remain available. Any temporary reduction in physical strength experienced during fasting is typically due to depleted glycogen, not muscle breakdown. Once eating resumes, strength returns quickly. By the 24th hour, the body has completed a full metabolic transition. It is no longer relying on incoming calories. It is operating on internal intelligence. Fat metabolism is dominant. Ketone production is steady. Autophagy is active. Growth hormone is elevated. The nervous system has adapted. The cardiovascular system has recalibrated. What began as perceived deprivation has revealed itself as coordination. This does not mean fasting is effortless or universally appropriate. Individuals with certain medical conditions require supervision. Listening to the body remains essential. But for healthy adults, a single 24-hour fast demonstrates something often forgotten in modern life. The human body is not fragile. It is adaptable, responsive, and remarkably intelligent. Fasting is not a magic cure, nor is it a lifestyle requirement. It is a tool, a way to step briefly outside constant consumption and allow biological systems to perform the maintenance they were designed to do. The lesson of a 24-hour fast is not about endurance. It is about rediscovering flexibility. When the body is given space, it does not weaken, it reorganizes. And in that reorganization we see a quiet truth. Hunger is not the absence of strength, it is the doorway to a different kind of control. After 24 hours without food, something subtle but profound begins to reveal itself. The most important change is no longer metabolic, it is psychological. The body has already proven that it can survive, adapt, and function without constant intake. What now comes into focus is the relationship between hunger and identity, between discomfort and control. Most people are taught, implicitly, that hunger is an emergency, a signal that something is wrong, a state that must be fixed immediately. Fasting dismantles that assumption. When hunger no longer dictates immediate action, the nervous system learns a different lesson. Sensations can arise without requiring reaction. Discomfort can exist without panic. This recalibration matters far beyond nutrition. It reshapes how the brain interprets stress. Hunger becomes information, not command. And once that distinction is made, it often transfers to other areas of life. Modern environments condition constant response. Notifications demand attention, cravings demand satisfaction, stress demands relief. Fasting interrupts this loop, not by force but by exposure. It creates a controlled environment where urges arise, peak, and dissolve without being obeyed. Over time, this experience weakens the reflexive link between sensation and action. Self-control stops being a matter of resistance and becomes a matter of understanding. This psychological shift explains why many people describe fasting as mentally clarifying, even after food is reintroduced. The brain has rehearsed restraint. It has experienced calm without stimulation. Neural circuits involved in impulse regulation and emotional processing begin to recalibrate. This does not happen because fasting is extreme. It happens because fasting removes constant interference. The stress response itself changes. Cortisol, often associated with stress, does not spike uncontrollably during a short fast. Instead, it follows a more measured pattern. The body interprets the fast not as trauma, but as a manageable challenge. This distinction is crucial. Chronic stress damages systems because it feels endless and uncontrollable. Fasting, when chosen intentionally, is finite and predictable. The nervous system responds accordingly. This is why fasting can feel empowering rather than depleting. The individual is not being deprived, they are participating. Agency matters. When stress is voluntary and time-bound, it builds resilience rather than exhaustion. The same principle applies to physical training, cold exposure, or mental discipline. The body adapts differently when it understands that the challenge has structure. Another often overlooked change occurs in the gut-brain axis. After extended periods without food, the microbiome begins to rebalance. Certain bacteria that thrive on constant sugar intake decrease, while others associated with metabolic flexibility become more active. This shift influences not only digestion but mood and emotional regulation. The gut communicates directly with the brain through neural and chemical pathways. As microbial balance changes, mental states often follow. This may explain why some people report improved emotional stability or reduced anxiety following controlled fasting periods. The effect is not mystical, it is biochemical and neurological. Reduced inflammation, improved gut barrier integrity, and altered neurotransmitter production all contribute to a calmer baseline. The mind feels clearer because the body is quieter. Importantly, this does not mean fasting should be constant or extreme. The benefits described arise from contrast, from stepping out of constant consumption long enough for regulatory systems to recalibrate. Once food is reintroduced, the body responds differently. Insulin sensitivity improves. Satiety signals become clearer. Hunger cues regain meaning. Eating becomes intentional rather than automatic. This is where many misunderstand fasting. It is not about pushing limits, it is about restoring signals. In an environment of continuous access, biological cues become distorted, hunger becomes noise. Fullness becomes delayed, energy becomes erratic. Fasting reestablishes the signal-to-noise ratio. It gives the body a reference point. Perhaps the most important takeaway from a 24-hour fast is not what happens during the fast, but what happens after. The individual re-enters eating with awareness. Food is no longer background. It is foreground. Taste intensifies. Satisfaction arrives sooner. Excess feels unnecessary. This shift does not require willpower. It emerges naturally when regulatory systems are reset. The body remembers how to stop. This is a skill modern life erodes. Constant availability removes the need for internal cues. Fasting reactivates them. It teaches the body when to eat, when to stop, and when to wait. These are not moral decisions. They are biological competencies. Over time, repeated exposure to controlled fasting can reshape long-term habits. Not through restriction, but through clarity. The individual becomes less reactive, less driven by fluctuations, more attuned to internal states. Hunger becomes one signal among many, not the loudest voice in the room. This is why fasting often intersects with broader lifestyle change. Sleep improves, stress tolerance increases, emotional regulation strengthens. Not because fasting fixes everything, but because it removes constant interference long enough for systems to remember how to function. The body was never designed to be fed continuously. It was designed to adapt. Fasting reminds it of that capacity, and in doing so, it reminds the individual of theirs. Once the 24-hour fast ends and food is reintroduced, the body does not simply return to normal. It responds differently. This phase is often overlooked, yet it reveals some of the clearest physiological effects of fasting. The first noticeable change occurs in digestion. After a prolonged break, digestive enzymes are released more efficiently, and the stomach tends to empty more slowly. Many people feel full sooner than expected. This is not willpower. It is a recalibrated satiety response. Insulin sensitivity is typically improved after a short fast. When food enters the system again, glucose is handled more efficiently, requiring less insulin to move it into cells. This effect is temporary but measurable. It explains why post-fast meals often feel more stabilizing rather than energizing or sedating. Blood sugar fluctuations tend to be smoother, especially when meals are moderate and balanced. Appetite signaling also changes. Ghrelin, the hormone associated with hunger, does not immediately spike back to baseline. In many cases, it remains suppressed for several hours after eating resumes. This creates a window where hunger cues feel quieter and more precise. Eating becomes guided more by physiological need than by habit or impulse. This is not permanent, but it highlights how flexible appetite regulation actually is. Energy levels after breaking a fast often surprise people. Rather than a sudden surge, energy tends to return gradually and steadily. This reflects the body's continued use of fat and ketones alongside incoming nutrients. Metabolic systems do not switch instantly, they overlap. This overlap reduces the sharp highs and lows commonly associated with frequent eating. Muscles replenish glycogen over time, not all at once, which is why physical strength returns progressively rather than immediately. The cardiovascular system also maintains some of the adaptations established during the fast. Lower inflammation markers do not instantly rebound, and vascular function remains improved for a period. Heart rate variability often stays elevated temporarily, indicating sustained resilience. These effects are subtle, but they demonstrate that the body does not forget a metabolic state the moment eating resumes. Autophagy gradually decreases once nutrients return, but it does not shut off instantly. Cellular cleanup continues briefly, completing processes that were initiated during the fast. This delayed tapering is part of why short fasts are studied for their potential maintenance benefits rather than dramatic transformations. The body prioritizes finishing repair before fully shifting back into growth and storage modes. Hormone levels also normalize in stages. Growth hormone declines as food intake increases, but its protective effects persist long enough to prevent rapid muscle breakdown. Protein synthesis resumes once amino acids become available and lean tissue is preserved. Any transient weakness experienced during the fast resolves as glycogen stores refill. This reinforces an important point. Short-term fasting does not reverse physical conditioning when followed by adequate nutrition. The gut microbiome responds more slowly than other systems. Changes in bacterial populations that occur during fasting may persist for days, especially if post-fast meals are not excessively processed or sugar-heavy. Increased microbial diversity is not guaranteed, but the reset created by fasting allows the gut environment to respond more clearly to dietary input. This is why food choices after a fast often have a noticeable impact on digestion and comfort. Psychologically, many people notice a shift in how hunger is perceived after the fast ends. Sensations feel clearer and less urgent. Eating becomes more deliberate, not because of restraint, but because signals are easier to interpret. This effect fades with time, but it demonstrates that hunger perception is not fixed. It adapts to patterns of intake and absence. Importantly, none of these responses require fasting to be frequent or extreme. The physiological changes described here arise from a single, time-limited interruption of constant feeding. For most healthy adults, this serves as a demonstration rather than a prescription. It shows how adaptable the body is, not how far it should be pushed. If you're finding this breakdown useful and grounded in evidence rather than hype, consider liking the video or subscribing. It helps support clear, practical explanations of how the body works. From a scientific standpoint, the value of a 24-hour fast lies in what it reveals, not what it promises. It exposes metabolic flexibility that is often masked by continuous intake. It shows that systems responsible for energy regulation, repair, and signaling remain functional and responsive when given space. It does not replace nutrition, exercise, or rest. It temporarily shifts priorities. After the fast, the body resumes growth, repair, and storage, but with slightly altered sensitivity. This altered sensitivity fades as normal eating patterns return, which is why fasting effects should not be overstated. They are not permanent changes. They are temporary adjustments that demonstrate capacity. In practical terms, this means fasting is best understood as a tool for observation rather than optimization. It allows individuals to see how their bodies respond to absence and reintroduction. Some notice clearer digestion, others notice calmer appetite signals, some notice no meaningful difference at all. All of these outcomes are valid. The key takeaway from the final phase of a short fast is simple. The body adapts both entering and exiting food deprivation. It does not require extremes to do so. A single day without food does not break the system. It briefly exposes how the system is designed to function when inputs change. That is the complete arc of a 24-hour fast. Not collapse, not transformation. Adaptation.